Yeah? Okay. Hey, everyone, and welcome to the Engaging Networks Community Conference Portland. Really appreciate all of you doing exactly what all my students did when I taught high school math, which is no one sits in the front row, everyone sat in the back, so I appreciate that. So yeah, there's all these empty seats for all the late people, right? They have to come in here, they have to sit up here, which would be good. So this is our first conference, obviously, out here on the West Coast. We're growing our presence out here. We just brought on Eric Rubin, if you haven't met him. He's our new Director of Business Development out here on the West Coast. And really looking forward to having kind of some placement out here and growing our client base out here. So, but again, thanks so much for showing up today. Have a lot of Engaging Networks staff members. If you need any help or anything like that, you have myself, you have Graham, you have Eric, you have John back there, Josh is in the back. Clint just walked in right on time. Thank you, Clint. And then Kathy registered you. So, and we're here oh, there she is. That was great. We're here all week. We'll be at N10. Kathy, what booth are we in? Okay. What booth are we in? 317 and 319. Tomorrow night, we're having a happy hour at Doug Fir. That's right, yeah, at Doug Fir. So if you haven't already signed up for that, you can register for that, or just show up. It's fine. It's an open bar. Should be a lot of fun. Have a nice time there. So I think those are our big things for Portland for this week. Is that right? Yes. Got all the thing in? OK. So then beyond that, just a few quick things. The Wi-Fi are on little cards, if you haven't seen them already. They're just WTC_event, and the password just has a $ sign on the ends. Women's restroom is just down the hall on the left right before registration. Men's is just right around the corner. There's plenty of water outside. There'll be food outside all day. You can see our schedule up here. We have our keynote with Graham. We'll start here in about 2 minutes. We'll have a small break. They're going to switch the rooms up. So this will become room A, and back there will become room B. Sessions, we go to lunch. Lunch starts about 1:15. Sessions, and then we kind of get you out of here. And we'll kind of let you know about the happy hour and kind of how that's going to go and see where we go from there. Any other questions before we get started? All right, so just to begin, we have a few slides here. Oh, oops.
Is that it? Yeah. Oh, you had other slides.
No, that's fine. I can do it from memory.
Here.
You can just throw that up.
Which
That's
one's
fine.
yours?
Nah, just throw it up. Yeah, it's fine. Just present yours. There we go. Other people we'd like to thank Brian Kassler from Foresight for sponsoring, Ira from Corner Shop Creative. Also, a special shout out to Ira. They actually just finished up our new website, so engagingnetworks.net. Go in, take a look at it. Looks real nice, really great. I've had way too much training on WordPress that I never thought I was going to need. So I'm looking forward to editing it and not trying to break it, right? That's the main job. Then edit, don't break. And then Matt is here from Yibu Digital, so check them out as well. So hi, Matt. Thanks for showing up. All three of them will also be presenting today. So if you want to check out what they have going on, the sessions are digital. I know people complain that I don't print out pieces of paper, but it is a digital copy. There was one change. So if you looked earlier, you would have seen that I was going to give a presentation. That has now switched over to Graham giving a presentation. He's going to do a roadmap deep dive at 11:15. So instead of my hidden gems thing that I made up, it'll be Graham doing one instead. So, but other than that, I can turn it over to you. You're all set. Thanks, Graham.
Thank you very much. So quick question first. Was anyone at the community conference we had in Washington, D.C. in October? Raise your hand. OK, so a lot of these slides are going to look really similar to the ones you've already seen. But that's OK. I've added some more slides, and I'm going to do it a little bit differently this time as well. So I just want to say actually thank you to Kathy for the whole process. And obviously, we worked with Corner Shop Creative on rebranding Engaging Networks, bringing us into the 21st century, updating our website. And I'm sure Kathy is mortified right now because I still have slides using our old brand. But Kathy, you'll be pleased to know the last slide does have our new logo. So yay, a little victory for you. So my keynote really is just an opportunity for me to talk about what, I guess really kind of highlight some of the things that happened in 2018 and also focus a little bit on what our plans are and what we're up to in 2019. So a lot of the information I'm going to share with you is really just sort of product specific, but also kind of company specific. And I'd like to turn it into a little bit of a Q&A as well. So when I've kind of finished talking about a section, if you have questions, I'd love to take them during the presentation as well. So the first thing I would like to do, though, is say that this is about the same size group that we had in Sydney, Australia in January. We have a good collection of organizations and partners using the technology in Sydney. It also meant that I could go to Byron Bay and surf for a week afterwards, which was fantastic. The focus, though, of all these events, whether it's Sydney, Toronto, ENCC West, Washington, London, is to encourage all of you guys to really talk to each other and to grow as a community, with agency partners, as individual nonprofits, and so on and so forth. So the purpose really of today, apart from us just kind of giving you a bunch of information about the use of the technology or things around digital strategy, is to really for all of you to connect. And I'd like to start that process now. If you guys could just not talk to the person that sits beside you at the office 5 days a week, but actually just talk to someone else around you, and maybe just share some really kind of awesome plan that you have set up for 2019 as a way for you to get to know each other, and also maybe just talk about how maybe those plans involve engaging networks. So I'll give you 2 or 3 minutes and just talk to someone, again, preferably not someone you speak to every day.
To our community, exactly what you just said.
Oh, there you go.
Hold on to that spirit.
Another minute? One more minute? Okay, guys, if we can wrap it up. Hey, guys. By the way, okay, I was with an Uber driver last night, and actually, she told me this hysterical story. Is there anyone here from Portland? Just one of you? Okay. You have to tell me if this is true. But she said that there was this big, huge warning about having snowmageddon in Portland in February, and they were expecting 2 to 6 inches of snow, and it was going to be a nightmare. Apparently never actually happened, but when you get those warnings, everyone goes to the local shop, goes shopping and tries to stock up on food and everything else. And so after Snowmageddon didn't happen though, apparently they just had video on the news of all the sections of the grocery stores that were totally wiped out of everything. And apparently what went first was the kale. Is that true?
That sounds about
Yeah. I thought that, that wouldn't have been my first choice, but anyway, yeah. Okay. So listen, to get everyone into the spirit of things, the other thing that I found last night, I'm staying at this hotel on the other side of the river, and I went to their gym next door, and they have an altitude center, and I don't know if you know what they are, but it's basically like a gym with treadmills and equipment, but they actually reduce the level of oxygen in the room to various equivalent elevations. So normally at sea level, you've got just under 21% oxygen in the air. And this Evolution Gym, they have this center, and yesterday they turned it down to about 14.4% oxygen, which is the equivalent of about 9,000 feet above sea level. I can't tell you how excited I was about that whole thing. It was amazing, because I like to do a lot of mountaineering and climbing in Nepal, and they actually have an altitude center in London, which I go to. But to find an altitude center beside my hotel, I felt like extending my stay by a week. It was great. But to get everyone excited, I'm going to show you a little bit of a clip from me climbing last summer in Italy, just to get your blood going. This is me climbing on a route in Italy.
On good old Mother Earth?
I actually had the GoPro on my wrist, so you can really...
Well, hang on. I'm just going to put in one more nut to basically double anchor this, and then I promise I'll come down.
The woman at the bottom, she'd never rock climbed before, and I asked her to belay me, and she kept asking me to come down. She was like, "Can you stop? Can you come down? Can you come down?" That was an amazing overhang right there, but she wanted me to come down before the end of it, which is really
okay.
sad.
Hang on. All right.
There you go.
Okay, so that's a locking carabiner. I'm going to change this for a locking carabiner. But let me just turn off the GoPro. Hang on.
Okay. Okay. Who wants to go climbing with me now? All right. Yeah, that's a route on the island of Basiluzzo in Italy, actually. It was actually a first ascent because no one's ever gone up there before, so it's kind of fun. All right. So let's talk about some stuff. So I'll just do a quick review of how we did in 2018, engaging networks. And for those of you that have heard this before, you'll know why I do this. We're a subscription-based service. So every year, we ask you to pay a subscription to be able to use the platform. And therefore, we as a company feel very strongly that we have an obligation to invest your money into the ongoing development of the platform. And so I think we're one of the most aggressive investors essentially of the client funds back into the ongoing development of our product. We typically have a release schedule about every 6 to 8 weeks, whether that's new modules, enhancements, feature upgrades, etc. So I want to just talk to you a little bit about how we've been doing as a company and how we've been improving and growing over the last year. And just again, to give you that sort of sense of the fact that we are growing, we still stay very strongly committed to that philosophy of taking your money and investing it back in the platform. So the more that we grow, the more that we develop, obviously then the more we'll be able to offer you in terms of the technology that we build. This just gives you a snapshot of some of the email volume in September 2018 versus previous years. So you can see in September 2018, we sent 211 million emails. Most of those are marketing emails. Obviously, your organization's sending emails out to your supporters. And you can see the growth. In fact, overall, year on year, the total volume was just about 3.5 billion emails that we sent in calendar 2018. So obviously, in relationship to that, we've been adding more mail servers. We actually now have a new person working in our DevOps team named Gwyn, who used to be in client support, just to be able to help manage all the issues that come up with deliverability, list hygiene, coaching you to basically make sure that your deliverability is good. So we actually just keep building on this program. We use some fantastic email software called Power MTA by a company called Port25. And so we've been building out, obviously, our infrastructure to make sure that we continue to have the capacity that we need. This was 1.7 billion. That was at that point in the year. Numbers of pages served. Again, this is just taking a typical month in September 2018. 28 million pages served. Again, just with the point being that obviously we need to make sure that we continuously build out, our data infrastructure, reporting, all of our Elasticsearch infrastructure, application servers, et cetera. We actually added also a second data center last year. So we have our data center in Toronto. We also have our data center in Dallas. I suspect if you've joined us at any time in the last year and you're a US-based nonprofit, then your data is probably in the Dallas data center. And constituent records, this is now actually over 80 million constituent records. So internationally, this was, again, the number as of October 2018, so only about 4 or 5 months ago. It was 73 million individual constituent records that we manage for all of the organizations around the world. But again, that's already up over 80 million records now. Okay, so in 2018, we also introduced a lot of really fantastic new technology. You can see here, this is something called the Master Dashboard. For a lot of you, this isn't going to be really that relevant because you're not necessarily a federated organization. You might just have a single master account and then a single account because you're operating everything out of a single account. But we also have organizations like Big Brothers and Big Sisters of America, where they have a lot of local chapters, or you've got international organizations like Greenpeace, where we serve them in 30 different countries. So they actually those kind of federated groups sit under a single umbrella. And so we built out a lot of really neat infrastructure to be able to dedupe records between accounts, but also create kind of community assets at the master level. So someone who doesn't have maybe as big or robust a digital team can literally get a template that's built at the master level, pushed down to them. They can just grab it, use drag and drop tools to change maybe some of the content or do some of the editing on the HTML wrappers. And this has been fantastically helpful for those types of organizations. So if you're a single group working nationally, you don't have state-based organizations or local groups, or you don't work internationally and have other organizations, this may not be that relevant, but it was actually a very big deal for us to be able to introduce this content sharing and community function. This is going to be a big focus for some of our business development as well this year, where we want to take a lot of the amazing groups that we work with in a couple of countries like Amnesty, Oxfam, Save the Children, CARE, whoever, who work actually globally, because we'd like to encourage them to roll in a larger number of countries to be able to benefit from this kind of technology. So this was a big part of last year. You also might have seen that we introduced our e-commerce, our symbolic giving. So you can't, with this particular tool set, buy something and have it shipped to somebody, but you can obviously buy a symbolic gift basically online. And there's a whole process by which you can create a catalog of gifts. Again, everything can be customized. Everything works with all of our standard functionality, but the e-commerce module now, is anyone using it? Yep, you guys are using it? Okay. Oh yeah, you guys set it up for one of the Big Brothers, Big Sisters affiliates. Yeah, okay. Good?
I don't think it's gone live yet. I think it's like, T-minus 3 days.
Okay, damn. Okay, I could have shown it. Anyway, so the e-commerce, yeah. We built this on Page Builder, of course, so everything Page Builder is our core technology for building page types of any type. This is some stuff we did for being able to create a suggested gift, for example. So basically adapting or changing the gift string when people land on a donation page based on various calculations that you can do on highest previous contribution, percentages, fixed numbers, etc. It's actually quite a sophisticated approach, but it's all basically keyed off of whatever the constituents or the donor's highest previous contribution was. And we created tools so that that information could be imported as part of a constituent record, or you could just rely on the highest previous contribution data that transactionally we had processed within engaging networks. So this is actually quite a sophisticated tool, which again dynamically creates an asking string and a suggested amount for each individual donor based on whatever formulas you want to be able to create in the back end for that. So that was kind of a fun development as well. This is a process that we created to be able to allow you to dedupe records. So it's kind of like a fuzzy match. So if you have records, obviously we use email address as the unique identifier within engaging networks, but you might have someone using different email addresses, but actually having the same street address or the same name. And so we use some fuzzy match logic to be able to suggest to you a variety of records that could be 2 records or 3 records that might be the same individual, and you might want to merge that data. So we created a tool to be able to find those records as a back-end process, and then to be able to display them, and then give you tools to be able to decide which data you wanted to be able to retain when you merge those records. So that was sort of a CRM kind of type function that we needed to provide. And then we also added householding, so being able to associate records to other records based on a household. So this was, again, was something that we introduced in 2018. We also completely redid our asset libraries in terms of, and made other improvements to them because that was one of those things that we needed to effectively rebuild. And so now there's some really nice tools for being able to manage the assets that you've got within the product. So that was just a very small picture of what we did in 2018. If you guys have been with us for anything more than a year, you'll know that we actually do this plus more every single year. So we have a very aggressive program in place for 2019. I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. But this is what you can expect from us, is just this continuous investment in the technology. Any questions about last year, about 2018, or how we're progressing? Everyone happy? Anyone using our technology? Okay, all right. Okay, so 2019. So 2019, you know, we're going to be a little bit more, I guess the best word is kind of introspective about our technology. One of the things that we've done over the last 2 or 3 years, when we first launched Page Builder, which is again this core functionality for building pages of any type, we wanted to make sure that all those modules, key modules, were built out within Page Builder, donation pages. What is it when you give some money and you get like a panda bear? What is that? Premium. A premium giving. There you go. Obviously, advocacy. We've just released Click to Call this year, which was actually part of the program last year. The e-commerce module, membership, that's also just been released now as well. So a lot of our focus over the last couple of years was improving Page Builder, but at the same time, really kind of building out the functionality so that now you can do, for example, in the next release, I think, it's scheduled e-cards, etc. So we've been kind of building it out this way. In 2019, we really want to pause a little bit and build depth into things that we've already released rather than keep adding like another 3 modules this year. Part of the reason for that is the idea behind technical debt, which if any of you know, this term is essentially the accumulation of technology that when you want to start building, adding, or improving technology, you kind of keep adding it on top rather than kind of stripping it down and rebuilding it. We're not afraid to rebuild stuff, so we really don't like technical debt. Now that we've retired the old page building technology, we feel that we've kind of expanded Page Builder for the time being out to a point where it's useful for all of our clients. We don't want to kind of keep doing that and adding more technical debt. We want to be a little bit introspective, look at the core technology, the back-end stuff that we're doing, and see where we can now go through that process and kind of enhance the code and the technology. So managing technical debt is going to be a big deal for us in 2019. But of course, we're still going to be progressing the platform, but just not building it out, but kind of building it deeper. So things like, for example, reporting. Reporting is an area that we introduced like 2 or 3 years ago. The dashboard reporting and also some of the download reports. But that's an area that we really want to focus on this year, is to think about how we can improve the way that we filter and create dynamic reports, both for display on the actual dashboard screens, as well as being able to create those downloadable reports that you can get for things like email deliverability and ROI for email programs and so on. So reporting is one thing. Again, not building it out, but just kind of like taking stock of where we're at and thinking about how we can recreate and reimagine that whole area of reporting. So more downloadable reports, filtering options, for example, for origin source. That's actually coming in the April release in 2019. We're also doing a dashboard overhaul. There's a few things that we've done. I mean, the dashboard basically now has been completely overhauled. There's still a couple of things that are in the legacy tools that you have to kind of click through to view. So we're going to finish with those basically and bring them back in. So that's some of the stuff that we're going to be doing on reporting. And also that includes the homepage dashboard. Page Builder. Surveys in the current cycle. So we had a release in February when we released Click to Call. The survey, which will include, so you can do a survey now in Engaging Networks, which basically involves building a page and putting a bunch of questions in it. Of course, trying to figure out how many people answered each of those questions is a bit of a nightmare, because it's not a purpose-built survey. It's actually just you creating a page with a whole bunch of questions. So we want to build, obviously, a proper survey that has dynamic behavior on the page. So if people are responding to a particular question, and that opens up a series of sub-questions, you can do that. But then also to give you the reporting on that so that you can actually see the responses to various, and be able to filter them, for example, by profiles and so on and so forth. So a survey is one of the things that we're doing to kind of build out Page Builder because it's a relatively modest one. And aggravated advocacy messages. The idea was we have something called the political exchange. It's not really used that much in the States, so I'm not going to go into a lot of this right now, but there are some places that rather than trying to be able to have one individual send one email message to their member of Congress or their state assembly member, you would actually aggregate them and send a bunch of those messages in a single email to that representative. It's something that's more in demand in Europe than it is in the States, because as you know, we're now connected to the communicating with Congress stuff and regulations.gov where stuff goes in electronically and you can't do that anyway. And I think the Senate now is going to add themselves to the communicating with Congress stuff. So, so that's going to be fantastic too. So there are some things we're doing there. We are doing some time delivery though, which is relevant for the States. So sometimes on advocacy messaging, you want to be able to send all of your messages or a batch of your messages on a specific date because you know there's a committee hearing that day or there's something happening the next day or you've got a press release coming. So coming up in the upcoming cycle, you will be able to hold those messages and then send them, but they'll still go through as individual messages, obviously, to the target. So they're doing a couple things on Page Builder, but not a whole lot this year. The hub, we're going to be doing some stuff, integrating some of the peer-to-peer functionality to create gadgets, basically for the, so if you have supporters that are doing things on peer-to-peer, being able to pull that information into a gadget within the hub. Is anyone using the hub? Man. So yeah, the hub is kind of a really neat tool. It's basically a place where an individual supporter, you can serve them up dynamic content based on their profile. So if they've signed a petition or taken part in an advocacy campaign, you can put updates on that within Page Builder, and then they will automatically populate for a supporter when they go into their hub. Same thing, if they're a single donor and you want to upsell them to recurring, you can show them their donation history, but then give them an opportunity to now upsell their donation to monthly. If they're already monthly, then maybe you just want to give them a chance to increase their monthly gift by 10% or whatever. So the idea behind the hub is not just to present a whole bunch of kind of static content that's generic to everybody, but rather create an opportunity for an individual supporter to kind of see what's what's happened to the money, for example, that they've previously donated for a specific campaign you might have had, or what's happened for a campaign you were running a petition on, or whatever. So there's a lot of potential for the hub to become a much more interactive and engaging place. And we want to build out some more gadgets, basically. Single sign-on is another thing, so that if someone is signed into an account on your own website, if you have that infrastructure on your site, that they would be able to click through to the hub, and then we would use single sign-on to essentially take them straight to their hub page. Local organizing is another thing that we really think the hub is going to be great for. So if people do want to get involved in local organizing, it's again a great opportunity for people to be able to kind of have a gadget in there where they can see what events they might be able to attend and things they might be able to go to. And machine learning, I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but machine learning is a big backbone to a lot of the work that we're doing this year. But the idea is that you can actually get a machine learning process to be able to now dynamically populate content within the hub based on things that it knows about the classifications of those individual supporters. And I'll talk a little bit about that as well. Click to call, so that's out. That was in 2019, but because we're in March, it's already out the door. We've had a lot of demand for that already, I think. Clint, I don't know, there's been a dozen organizations or more that are interested in getting started.
In various processes.
Yeah, so we did an integration with Twilio on the back end to be able to actually have the auto dialers work and all the rest of it. But click to call is something which is out now. Ben, I don't know, is there a webinar on click to call at some point, or?
There's a session today with Jonathan Lukowski.
Okay, cool.
We'll be flipping that and making it an on-demand webinar for folks.
Okay, perfect. So that's click to call. Marketing automation. So we have some amazing tools for marketing automation. I hope you guys are using that for either welcome series or people who are new donors or signing petitions or taking part in advocacy for specific campaigns that you want to go into a type of funnel, upselling activists to donors, whatever it is you're doing. So we've had some tremendous success, but there's some focus that we want to bring into this. We're going to create some new workflow templates. We're also going to be able to improve some of the filters so that you can select audiences to qualify them for a workflow more specifically. And we're also going to introduce SMS text messaging as an alternate channel so that when people are in a workflow, if they're not responding to email and you have a telephone number for them, a mobile phone number, you'll be able to then switch to SMS text messaging. And again, that's because we've introduced Twilio now for our click-to-call technology. We now have some infrastructure in place where we can use that for other types of telephony services or mobile services. So marketing automation, we're going to continue to improve that. Geolocation stuff. It's not going to quite look like this in the first phase. We ran into some really interesting hurdles trying to get this organized, but the idea is that if you want to target or select for your outbound email communication or for the purposes of reporting or for exporting data, people within a specific area, that you'll be able to select them. You will be able to do it by, for example, drawing on a map. That's going to be phase 2 though, because that actually is ridiculously complicated. So initially what we're doing is doing things like a point on a map where you can have a certain radius around that point, or a geographic constituency like a district or a state or whatever. So there's a bunch of stuff that we're doing. Eventually you'll be able to actually draw boundaries and select multiple and do that, but the drawing portion we're actually doing in a phase 2 because we just want to get this out. So that's, again, if you're targeting people for specific campaigns based on geolocation, you'll be able to do that using a map tool. Yeah, and this is what's going to come in phase 2, because the dot and radius thing is simple, but the draw thing is apparently a bit of a nightmare. So donation pages, we're doing smart reCAPTCHA. We're going to introduce, so I know a lot of you already have CAPTCHA on your donation pages. We're going to do smart reCAPTCHA, email notifications when pages start blocking IPs for fraud. So we have a default process where if you get a certain number of requests or donations that are attempted, for example, within a very short period of time that fail, typically that's someone who's testing card data. So we block the IP address. Of course, fraudsters are really smart and they dynamically change the IP and keep going. But actually, we've quite often found that if you retire that page and replace it, forward it, that tends to stop them for some reason. I'm not really sure why. So we're going to start sending out email notifications when you start getting IP blocks for fraud. Designations is something that we want to introduce on the donation pages as well, so that someone can, for example, if you're a university, someone could say, I want to designate this much money for this program and designate this much money for this program and this program, so that we can then also individualize receipting and so on and so forth. So designations of gifts with different receipting. And then also there is a kind of a clunky redirect process and now for donors, but actually we're going to redo essentially how you can redirect a donor once they've actually made a donation. So that's one of the things that we're doing. So again, this is kind of building into stuff that we already have, as opposed to building out new page types. Machine learning, I'm going to talk about this actually in the next section rather than going through this. Some other useful stuff, there'll be new sharing options for pages, including WhatsApp, and HTML editing tools for the drag and drop copy blocks in bulk email. Apparently that's a thing for a lot of organizations that want to be able to access the HTML within the blocks. And social sharing icons in the thank you emails as well. So there's other stuff like this. I literally have 4 pages of stuff. We've now built out from February, April, and now we're working on the June release. So our cycles normally are planned on again a 6 to 8 week basis. We already know what's going into April. We have to take a decision a couple weeks in advance whether or not we, based on the QA cycles, can commit to everything or whether we have to stop, focus on QA, and maybe push something into the following one. So it's a very dynamic process. But we've got April sorted out, and we know that what we want to have as a core bulk of tools in June. But again, every month we basically I have a weekly call with our head of product development, Dan, and our CTO, Farhat, and we basically go through this list every single week. So, okay, so questions about 2019. There's going to be a separate session on technology roadmap, so we can dive into some of the stuff a bit more. But quite frankly, that's kind of the big picture. Questions? No?
We should do targeting when I was a client.
Okay. Kathy, that's not helpful.
It's very exciting.
Okay. Okay. Well, I saw a few other heads nod, so I think that's definitely going to be a winner. So that's in the current cycle. So, okay. So I'm going to talk to you about accessible intelligence. Accessible intelligence is a sister company to Engaging Networks. It's a sister company because I own them both. So maybe it's a brother company, I don't know. So it's an associated company, but it has been set up as a separate business because the applications and the machine learning that we're doing is actually not just applicable to Engaging Networks, it's potentially applicable to other organizations using other platforms, which is why it's been set up separately. The one thing I want to emphasize, though, is for you as Engaging Networks clients, this is the fact that it's accessible intelligence, which is actually building training models and developing the outputs for predictive behavior, is actually irrelevant to you. You won't see anything different. You'll be in Engaging Networks. It will be completely integrated within the Engaging Networks platform. So there's no issues there. I'm gonna try and skip through this because I'm gonna focus a little bit more in the technology session. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this, and I'm also just conscious of the fact it's 11:15. So what is machine learning and AI? So AI is this really general, broad, blanket term that talks about having machines being able to learn. In reality, if you, as I said, I've used this example before, if you actually stood on a corner somewhere downtown here in Portland in 1972 and showed them your iPhone, XS, and showed them that you can actually get a map that will give you the best route to get from point A to point B, indicate where traffic is, and then when you're in it, give you an alternate route should something happen, that person would have actually looked at your phone and gone, that's artificial intelligence. That's the ability of a machine to be able to do something which, quite frankly, only people would have been able to do by driving the route themselves. So it's kind of like this AI, this reference to AI is this ever-moving kind of goalpost where we keep thinking that things have to get better and better and better and harder and harder and harder. So I mean, AI is kind of like a great branding term, but actually it's almost meaningless in some ways. Machine learning and deep learning in particular are the specifics of what has driven so much of the AI work over the last 20 years in particular. The idea behind machine learning is very simple. We had the appearance of massive amounts of data huge ability to increase computational power, processing power, as well as network servers like a neural network like your brain. And the combination of massive amounts of data and computing power now allowed organizations to think about, well, how that data could be used to teach an algorithm within a machine application to be able to now predict behavior, which you could then potentially implement in some way, some kind of actionable item on the back end. So when they had that famous meeting in Dartmouth University in the 1950s, the whole emphasis on AI at that point was still about trying to codify rules. If this, then this, if this, then this, and that's why it wasn't going anywhere. So they were trying to get machines to reason, to navigate, to do this, to do that. They were being very unsuccessful because it just wasn't a successful way of doing it. By giving, whether it's self-driving cars, by giving them huge amounts of data and the processing power, all of a sudden now you can predict behaviors and make adjustments, make decisions, do whatever. A lot of that classical stuff has been done, for example, for you as nonprofits, more on the program implementation side. So I was with HIAS in New York, just earlier, I guess late last week, and they were saying that, for example, they've got a machine learning program which helps them situate Jewish refugees coming to the United States in cities where they think they'll be most successful based on their qualifications, based on their community, their origin, their ethnicity, their whatever. And they said it's produced amazing results. So that's a very simple example where you're taking a lot of data about where previous immigrants have been successful in finding work, integrating in communities and so on and so forth, using that information, being able to actually have an algorithm look at someone new and say, here's the best place in the States for that individual to actually find a job and integrate, et cetera. And so that's what a lot of the nonprofit machine learning has been focusing on, whether it's trying to find wild game poachers in Africa, whether it's the highest example, distributing relief, whatever. But you guys are marketers and fundraisers, so what's the potential of machine learning to actually help you guys achieve your objectives? So, and I'm going to talk about this in these three sections, the side of the idea of data, massive amounts of data, using that data by running algorithms within applications to be able to find patterns, and based on those patterns to be able to predict behavior, but then being able to integrate or implement whatever those suggestions are. So those are the three big boxes of any machine learning program. All starts with data. The algorithms are doing their work on training data to be able to predict behavior and find, based on patterns that they find, and then you want to be able to do something with it. So for example, data that we've got lots of transactional information. We have terabytes of transactional information. We have lots of data that relates to donations that have been made, the amounts of those donations, where people live, certain aspects of their constituent record, like their country, state, whatever, whether they also sign petitions, whether they do whatever. So there's lots of data that we have, but there was one set of data which I think is extremely important to be able to actually give the algorithms a much more effective way of trying to classify your supporters to be able to be more effective at marketing. And it's content classification. So for example, it's trying to understand why not, okay, someone clicked through an email. We know someone clicked through an email. What was it in that email that got that supporter to actually click? Was it a happy image, a sad image? Was the tone of the email positive? Was it hopeful, fearful? Was there social proof? Was there a video? Was there whatever? The more data that you can provide the algorithms, the more effective it will be at classifying supporters and being able to predict behavior. So one of the things that we've started doing now is we've built an application that takes the email content that you're producing and the pages you're producing. We have two people, Melis and Heather, who are doing content classification. So there's a variety of, we built this application, so we're basically saying, okay, what's the general tone of this? What's the emotion? What's the reading level? What's this? What's that? What's whatever? And we're building that up as additional data for the algorithms to look through. So in other words, in addition to having transactional information about what they're doing, petitions, events, e-commerce, donations, frequency, time of year they're doing it, constituent data, we also want to find out what the triggers are. What are the emotional triggers for someone responding to one of your appeals? The only way we could do that is by starting to classify the content in the communication that you're sending them. Does that make sense? If you put this email, this is an actual email from Humane Society International, into one of the natural language processing tools to be able to figure out what that content is, it comes up with some of the most ridiculous stuff. Like, for example, the location is the ground. So there really wasn't a tool out there that could, through an automated process, be able to classify this content effectively. So what we did was, we wanted to be able to build out content classification categories and do it manually so we could get consistent data, but also be able to provide the kinds of things that we see in nonprofit emails. One of the things that you're going to see in June is you're going to start seeing how we've actually classified your content. So when you get an email list page or a page list page within the dashboard, you'll be able to click and see what classifications, what values we've given within the classification categories for that specific email. And you'll have the opportunity to kind of go, no, it's actually more like this. We're not going to automatically change it, but because we want to learn from that. If you think it's a certain way, we want to be able to understand why that happens, so that we can continuously improve the accuracy of how we're actually classifying content. So this is one of the overlays that you're going to see. And the amazing thing is that, for example, we just looked at Humane Society International, lots of emails. And so, for example, from emotion, between joy, hope, revulsion, fear, and other, this is kind of some of the initial analytics that we're getting out of a lot of this data. And it's really quite fascinating, actually. So the first thing you have to know is that we're working on data. We've built infrastructure to be able to actually create an app. We've built an app. We have 2 people on a full-time basis classifying content because we want to build up the amount of data that we have available to drive the machine learning program. So the magic is that middle box now, that kind of like analyze and predict. And we have a data scientist named Gordon Walsh. He often comes back to me and says things like, the algorithm will classify supporters into groups that will likely be non-interpretable. I'm a novice, but that doesn't sound really helpful. But he's like, yeah, no, this is great. And I'm like, okay, you got to explain that to me. So basically, the thing that we're doing when you get to machine learning is once you've got the data up and running, the first thing you want to do is to be able to classify supporters. And so let's say you guys, we want an algorithm to decide who within this room is similar. It's like a nearest neighbor kind of type decision tree algorithm that you want to run. You can direct it to look at certain types of data, and you can also direct it to limit the number of classifications it's going to create, but you can't actually necessarily understand why it's put people in certain classifications. That's why they're non-interpretable. So we have to be smart in making sure that those classifications are done on a basis of directing it to the right kind of data, the right kind of information. So for example, if you guys all have Gmail addresses and you guys all have Hotmail addresses, if we told the algorithm, when they're classifying all of you as supporters, to look at email address, it might use that as something to provide similarities between you guys and you guys. So we don't want it to do that, because email address is not going to be a good predictor of behavior. So we've been doing a lot of analytics on basic data to try and find out which types of data are the best at actually predicting behavior. Does that make sense? And you can come, if you want me to confuse you some more, you can come to my technology roadmap session. So the idea is that we want to say, you guys are classified as A's, and you guys are classified by B's by the algorithm. You guys as A's means that you're all similar. The algorithm's decided that you're all kind of the same. You belong in the same box, and you guys belong in the same box. What you then want to do is take a use case. So let's say the use case is upselling a single donor to a recurring donor. So you want the algorithm to look at all the single donors that have successfully upgraded to recurring donors in this group and basically say they did this by sending this type of messaging, this frequency, this kind of approach. So here's the marketing stream that you should send to all these guys. These guys, we also then, the algorithm looks at everyone in this classification and says, okay, everyone in this classification that's successfully gone from single donor to recurring donor, actually, you did it very differently. You did it differently because you wanted a lot more stewardship on your single gift before you were prepared to actually become a recurring donor. So now, basically, we have what are called supervised algorithms that are going to run, and say, okay, let's find all the single donors in this group, all the single donors in this group that have not yet made a recurring gift. And based on that training data, we're now going to say, here's the suggested marketing plan for those single donors, and here's the suggested marketing plan for those single donors. So now the algorithm, as long as you have content in a content library, which I'm going to talk about, now you can basically run the machine learning program in such a way as to say, now when someone comes into your database and they qualify as you're classified as group A, you're a single donor, you're not yet a recurring donor, we can now automatically provide a marketing stream to those single donors with the intention of converting them to monthly recurring donors. Does that make sense? So that's the kind of like the gymnastics. This is the random forest example I was giving you for classifications. And I've talked a little bit about this. And this is the kind of thing that we've been doing on the analytics side. So supporters with high levels of activism after they become a monthly donor have a longer retention before they stop regular donation for those that do drop out eventually of around 40% longer. So by doing this analytics on the data, we're helping direct the algorithms to look at the right kinds of information to be able to come up with the right behaviors, the right patterns. But this is, quite an interesting piece of data when you think about it. If you have, activist regular monthly donors, the ones that you can keep more active, they're going to stick around 40% longer than the ones that you don't. And you might think, what I'm going to do? I'm just going to focus on stewardship for those monthly donors, and I just want to make sure that I'm talking to them about their donations and our programs and whatever. That would suggest that there's a group of supporters at least that are more likely to actually become longer-term monthly donors if, in fact, you give them more things to do from an advocacy point of view. That gets factored into the marketing plan, and now all of a sudden you've got that whole process mapped out for you. Again, I'll dive into a little bit more within the technology roadmap session. But essentially, within engaging networks, you'll be able to see your supporters. Actually, I'll talk about that more in the technology roadmap session. But basically, you'll be able to see who gets classified within your database on the total number of classifications. There's a lot of stuff I can talk about in terms of being able to create different classifications, even for individual use cases, or maybe different verticals. So people who are supporters of human rights organizations versus animal rights organizations versus organizations based in the US or Canada, organizations of a certain size. All of those things have the potential to influence essentially how supporters are classified to be able to look for patterns and predict behavior. So you're not going to end up with one generic classification. You're probably going to end up with classifications that really are specific to your organization or the vertical that you're in, or your location, and potentially a whole bunch of other factors. So, but the idea is that once you have people into a classification, you can run it once and say, okay, we want to upsell single donors to recurring donors. So I'm just starting now with the machine learning program. I'm going to run this for everybody within my database, or a subset if you wanted to. But the idea is that once you run it once, this just keeps running. So now it's only looking at new records that are now qualifying for it. And do you want do you want people to only qualify for one machine learning marketing automation program, or do you want them to qualify for more than one? You're probably only going to want anyone to be on one marketing stream, not on 6, because we have a lot of use cases that we're building this stuff out for. You'll need to be able to build content libraries. So to be able to implement that automation, you're going to need to have a content library. So if you don't want to actually go and build the email for every single supporter, obviously you don't want to do that. The good thing about the content libraries that you'll have, you'll be able to populate them super easily. Because quite frankly, like the tone, the emotion, the writing level, whatever, is going to be things that people have already responded to in previous emails you've sent to them. So we will know within your account what emails actually correspond to those content criteria and those content classifications. So basically we'll be able to say, hey, look, if you're going to run this classification and you need these marketing streams, you're going to need these 12 bits of content, which you don't currently have. So you'll be able to go in, and then from there we're going to say, here's one that matches the content classifications by up to 90%, you're just missing a little bit of this, or you need to have a different type of image, or you need to have a different tone, or you need to have a different whatever. You can adjust it and then save it. So the idea is that you're building a content library that's going to satisfy the marketing requirements of all the use cases that you're running within the machine learning program. So where are we? So we've done a ton of work on data. We've got network infrastructure set up now. Content classification has been going on. We have data flows working between accessible intelligence and engaging networks. The only data that's actually going into accessible intelligence now is data that we have specific approvals from organizations that want to participate with us while we're doing the trialing. The implementation is something that we've done designs on, so we've actually talked it through, and we've actually made some progress here, but nothing has been built. And then on the data science, obviously this is something where we've been doing tons of analytics, a lot of work to make sure that all that data science is working. We expect to have our first use case running by June. There might be a little bit of a disconnect between the implementation and the use case, but we just have to see how that works over the next 2 or 3 months. We're gonna play it by ear. The one that we're working on to prioritize is upselling single donors to recurring. The reason we're doing that is that it's something that you can very tangibly measure. So you can say, typically, through our standard marketing automation of sending out an email to everybody, here's what we would normally be able to convert single donors to as a recurring donor over a period of 6 months. And with the machine learning program, hopefully we've been able to improve that by 300% or 400%. So we're taking something that has a very tangible endpoint so that we can actually do some very rigorous reporting so you can look at comparisons. And there's a lot of stuff that happens within the algorithms to prevent effectively this from becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is what happens in algorithms. You have to be able to actually retrain the models, rebuild the models, and there's other things you can do to basically make sure that you're not essentially predicting something that you're creating. Essentially, there's again no issues with integration as engaging networks clients. So we're very committed, as always. Just as a reminder, as a recap, my last slide. Product flexibility is essential to us. We always want to make sure we give you tools that will do whatever it is you need them to do. We are always looking for sophistication, so we're not looking to basically just dumb things down and basically make them completely simple. We want to make sure that we're giving you, innovative technology. Obviously to our product support and ease of use, which is something that we focused on over the last couple of years in particular. So there's the new logo. It's actually not a high-res version of it, though. That's the only thing. Sorry, Kathy. So I think I ripped it off our website. No, Josh sent it to me. So anyway, we had an exciting 2018. We're so happy that you guys are on the platform. We love having you as partners, as nonprofit clients. We've got an exciting year ahead. There's a lot of stuff that you can see that we're coming out with, and it won't be any different in 2020 or 2021. So, it's just it's always fun, and we will always be a product-focused company, and that's what you get with us. And I love that you guys are here, and I'm hopefully we'll be able to look at this event again next year and do it, and maybe have 50 or 60 people come. So. Thanks everyone.